We're all going to have to reduce the extent to which we fly. And there's actually a movement spreading through Europe at the moment, encouraging people to do just that. It's called Fliegskam, flight shame, but we're not about shaming people into travelling more sustainably. That's why we're here today at the University of Southampton to talk to, I guess you could call him a no-fly pioneer, someone who very much has walked the talk and practicing what they preach. We'll talk to him a little bit about the climate, we'll talk to him a little bit about travel, of course, and what you're missing out on sitting in the middle seat of an airplane. Recently, you've just come back from a trip to China, I believe, where you did some research on climate change, and you travelled to Beijing. How did you get to Beijing?
I took the train, or many trains actually, yes.
And you did it in?
Took about 2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks, non-stop, platform to platform, just running and gunning.
There were a couple of overnight stops to just stop me going insane, but pretty much it was almost all sleeping on trains and just changing as few times as possible. Yeah, getting there and back took it was 24 trains in total from Southampton to Beijing and the other places I went in China. So yeah, about 12 each way.
Do you know how many miles that is? I'm just trying to
yeah, I think round trip it's about 13,000 miles. Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's the furthest you've ever gone.
Without getting on a plane?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you think you'd do it again?
Yes, but not immediately.
What prompted your decision to go flight free?
This has been a topic that I've thought about for quite a long time. I spent a PhD that was kind of looking at carbon emissions from flying, and I learned that it's a big problem and it's growing, and in the rest of my life I think I'm relatively environmentally friendly, like lots of people. You know, I do my recycling, I don't own a car, I cycle everywhere, I'm vegetarian, but the kind of big elephant in the room was I still travelled and I still flew when I travelled generally. And I tried to reduce my flying. I bought carbon offsets when I flew, but I think last year something changed a little bit in my mind. There was an IPCC report came out saying we have, maybe just over 10 years to really tackle climate change, and I wanted to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And my research is about how society responds to climate change, so that's kind of maybe helping with some of the solutions, but still flying all the time, I thought that was contributing to the problem. So yeah, last year I made a pledge that I wouldn't fly in 2019, and again I've pledged I won't fly in 2020, and I hope to keep that going for as long as I can.
How have people in your life reacted to you deciding to go flightless, and not just your work life but your personal life as well?
Pretty much everybody has been, really positive about it, and I think it's made. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it surprised me that people have, trying to see what they could do in their own lives as well. And for some people it's easier than others, people with families or people who don't have much time off work. It's difficult. But a lot of people are, have said to me, I was going to fly to Glasgow for a job interview or for some work event, but I took the train because I would be embarrassed to kind of see you, Roger, after you've just been to China by train, and a few other examples of similar things. So I think, people have been, interested in it and trying to think about how they could how they could change their own lifestyles too.
What other incentives do you think at the policy level or at the commercial level can corporations offer to incentivize more sustainable travel?
Well, that's a really big question. I think, like I say,
I had one idea.
Well, go on. Yeah.
You. We have frequent flyer miles. What about frequent railway miles?
Yeah.
Or the equivalent?
Well, first of all, I think that air miles should be scrapped. I think they are a massive incentive in the wrong direction. The more you fly, the more you can fly, and it goes on and on.
You think you'd be punished, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a really perverse incentive, when we know everything about climate change and we know that aviation isn't great. So I think we should get rid of that immediately. As for whether you could have kind of train miles, I think that's a really interesting idea. There might be issues of capacity. I mean, it's easier to put hundreds of thousands of people into the sky in terms of space than it is to cram all those people onto trains. I think we'll have to confront that problem sooner rather than later, because I suspect in the future there's going to be a lot more people travelling by train, and maybe not for climate change reasons, but for other reasons, as we get more connected. So maybe in time, we should encourage people to be on the trains more, but we also need to be careful we don't kind of cripple our train network as well. But absolutely, get rid of the air miles as soon as we can.
What are the benefits of going flightless beyond reducing your impact on the environment? Obviously, you took trains to Beijing. You said you didn't really have much time for leisure, but maybe you can imagine.
Well, no, I did. To be fair, there was a couple of nights I had off the train, thank God, or I might have broken. So I got to see places I'd never been before. Like I stopped in Kiev for a night, Moscow for a night. I stopped in Lake Baikal, which I think you've seen as well. Yeah. It's a beautiful part of the world.
Lysvyanka, right?
Yeah, I stopped in Lysvyanka and Irkutsk as well, next to that beautiful lake. So you get to see parts of the world that you just usually fly over. While you're watching some crap film like on a flight, and you miss out on all of that. I think another thing is talking to people who you wouldn't usually speak to, even on a long haul flight. It's quite unusual for you to strike up a deep conversation with your neighbour, but if you throw strangers into a small cabin on a sleeper train where you might be on it for days potentially, you do end up talking to them, often using Google Translate or body language, but you learn about people who you would never otherwise meet. So I met businessmen and farming workers in Siberia, and I actually met a Russian Aeroflot pilot. Spent 10 hours chatting to him about all this stuff. And kind of Dutch tourists, Chinese tourists doing the kind of bucket list trans-Siberian. Yeah, so I think that's another thing that we don't get in other ways of travelling. Yeah,
that's a nice element. I hadn't really thought of that, and the kind of the human factor.
Yeah, and you need it, because otherwise you will go mad. Yeah, we all need to talk to people on those long kind of trips. Yeah. So. That was I didn't expect that either, but actually that was a really big kind of bonus to it.
Actually, you just how many adapters did you have to take going? It's a serious question. I'm curious.
Not actually that many, because let me think. In just the one, you just need the 2-pin. The EU one is the same that they use in Ukraine and Russia, and on the Chinese trains you can use those ones as well. It's only awkward England that has different plugs.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah, I got by.
Great. I think people will look to articles that say 80 or 70% of the world's pollutants are emitted by the top 100 companies, and say, what difference does it really make if I recycle this plastic bottle or turn off this light, when I don't want to name drop any company in particular, but there are massive changes that can be made on that corporate and indeed on that policy level. That what's the point if I do anything as an individual?
Well, I think that's a really convenient way for people to say, sod it, I'll just carry on. I'll buy a huge car, buy a huge house, and I'll fly 20 times, to Australia every year, and we can feel okay about ourselves. So I think it's a psychological defence mechanism. You have to ask yourself, those 100 top companies only exist because people like you, me, and everybody else buys their stuff, right? So as I said before, it's not an either or. Why are we going for flying when we could go for the coal companies, or why individuals instead of governments? Climate change is huge, and it's fiendishly complicated, and it's going to take everybody who has any kind of agency to do something about it. So I understand that there are power inequalities in our society which are problematic. There are fossil fuel companies who have successfully denied climate change as an issue and have lobbied politicians to not act, and that is a problem. Absolutely agree with that, but I don't think that we can just use that as an excuse to kind of get us off the hook. We're all implicated in a capitalist system as consumers and as citizens and as voters, so we can all do something.
Most airlines are turning to reducing single-use plastics. Do you think that's worthwhile or a distraction?
Everything's worthwhile. It's not either or, it's and. You know, climate change is huge. It encompasses all kinds of problems, and there are other problems which maybe aren't connected to climate change but are bad anyway, like pollution of our high seas. So yeah, absolutely, airlines, everybody should be reducing single-use plastics, but let's not fool ourselves that that's going to make air travel unproblematic. Western countries have been polluting for a long time. You know, we had our industrial revolution 150 years ago, whatever. China and other countries are just catching up, so they have a right to do whatever we have done in the past and are still doing. So I think, yeah, it's problematic when you think about the sheer, you know, the potential numbers of Chinese people who might, and other countries who'll be able to start flying. I think they have, in terms of kind of fairness, yeah, they have every right to do it, as much as anybody else. I do think that the climate, Mother Nature doesn't care about fairness and doesn't care about a history, doesn't care about when we had our industrial revolution, who went first, who went last. The difference between now and 150 years ago is now we know what pollution does and we know what climate change is doing. You know, we're in a very warm summer this year, and it's probably going to continue like that. We're very aware now, and we weren't in the past. And I think, I think everybody needs to pull their weight, including, you know, the large countries like China as well.
It's a hard sell, though.
Sure is. But I do think part of the problem with countries like China is that this topic that we're talking about is completely off the radar in China. And when I spoke to people there about this issue, that, you know, it was news to them, and I had to kind of go back and tell them, you know, some of the statistics, like you were saying, about trains versus planes, right. And a lot of them aren't aware of that. And I think, that all said, we need to lead by example in developed Western countries, or there is absolutely no chance China will change, you know, their emissions targets or their kind of everyday lifestyles. So unless we kind of lead by example, if you like, as in the West, there's absolutely no chance Indians, Chinese, Indonesians, Malaysians, Africans are gonna. Why should they change their lifestyles unless we are willing to do it first?
That's a very good point, well made, because when we've been doing our Vox Pops, a lot of people actually say, well, why are you asking us how we're going to change our behaviour? Look at China.
Yeah, it's an easy response, isn't it?
Yeah. Blame the other.
Yeah, and you know, I saw a meme the other day. There was a guy talking to an audience, and he said, "Who wants change?" Everybody puts their hands up, and then the second one was, "Who wants to change?" Everybody has their hand down. Yeah. And I think that says everything about kind of group culture, group psychology, and climate change. But if not us, who? If not now, when? You know, it's too late to start passing the buck to other people.